Good evening. Welcome to the Subaru Q&A session. Live stream. This session is not about me, it's about you, your car, your Subaru, your questions. Any question that you've got about tuning, modifications, what works, what doesn't work, good mods, bad mods, absolutely appalling mods, any questions like that, fire them at me and I will do my very best to answer them as honestly and as clearly as possible. If you don't know me, my name's Duncan. I'm at Subarus for a living in the UK. Been doing that for 20 years now. So there's most things that, most problems that I've seen, managed to solve over the years. So chances are, if you can give me enough information in a question, I can maybe point you in the right direction for a solution if I don't know the solution directly. Obviously in the UK, most cars that come to me are either sort of right away from 1992 early Imprezas and Legacies through the Foresters and Bug Eyes, Blob Eyes, Hawkeyes, and beyond that to the hatches and the saloons until about the 2018 cars. So we don't have anything beyond that in the UK. So if you're asking me a question about the newer vehicles, then chances are I haven't had hands-on experience of those cars directly, but I might be able to point you in the right direction. So please ask the question. If you're asking a question, which I would hopefully you want to, put a big Q at the beginning of it. That way I can see that it is a question rather than just a comment. And I will do my very best to answer it. These sessions normally last about 30 minutes to an hour. Depends on how many questions I get. If it's coming up towards the hour, then, obviously get your questions in, because there's nothing worse than having your question pop up on the stream after I've finished it. So, yeah, get them in early. I don't know how many people we've got viewing at the moment or in the live stream chat at the moment, but I can see that I've got a question in there at the moment from competition, but I'll come back to that in a minute about the time attack car. So I'll give you some news on that as to where we're at. I've had quite a wild day today. Most of the time I'm mapping Subarus, just normal Subarus. Most of them are, mildly modified to reasonably well modified. But today it was a Subaru engined VW Beetle drag car. You may have seen it in the shorts videos. I think I did a shorts video of it at Santa Pod. Quite a wild car. Very wild on the dyno. It does try and jump out the drag radials or the drag cross plies. are not particularly conducive to actually working on the dyno with it. So we got it up to the high 500s before the wheels just start spinning. So yeah, that'll be on the drag strip, hopefully in a low 9-second run very soon. So yeah, question. Right, any news on the time attack car that you tested at Evington? Brilliant video, by the way. Thank you very much. That video kind of took my breath away as to what that car was and what it was capable of doing. I think it is going to be a very special car once it's all fully tested, and we then turn the power up with the new engine, with the billet IAG engine. So yeah, once everything else is tested and sorted, the new engine goes in there, and we bump the power up to hopefully around 1,000 horsepower, and it should make it fairly quick because it's going to handle amazingly. The aerodynamics on it are incredible. But news on it, it's going to be at Japfest at Silverstone on the 19th of April. It'll be on the fast cast down there. So if you're interested in that car, come along to the show, have a nose around the car, talk to Lee, the owner. Hopefully I'll be up there as well. but I should be up there. So yeah, you'll be able to see me, speak to Lee, have a look around the car, and see where we're at with that. But the first proper track test is probably going to be around the May time, once the tracks are reliably dry, because we want to stress test some of the suspension setup, and we got the suspension guru that will be coming along for that day to actually iron out and actually set the ride heights and damper setup. So yeah, that'll be a fun day. Hopefully I'll get a chance to drive it on the track, because it just blew my mind as to what that was capable of on a very wet and cold airstrip. Right, hi Doug, hi Rex, how you doing, mate? Yeah, Matea, that's a difficult car to get in and out of, particularly when you're suffering from a hernia, which, my hernia issues still persist. The NHS in the UK has still not found time to book me in to get that sorted, which has been particularly challenging the last few weeks with the man flu, or whatever it is, COVID, cold, flu thing going around. It's not very good, sneezing uncontrollably or coughing a lot when you've got a hernia and it pops out every time. But yeah, not good. Right. Okay, evening. Hi Sam. What would you recommend for power mods on a 2013 SDI GV? I'm presuming it's a UK, in which case 2.5. It depends where you want it to get to. Personally, I think the 350 horsepower mark is a really nice, safe, drivable and actually fun level for those. You start pushing them up above 400 and you're into the realms of either breaking the standard engine or having to have a forged engine build on that. But the 2.5 engine, as standard, is not particularly strong. Mods map, obviously, map on the standard car will get you around the 320, 330 horsepower. With a D-cat or a sports cat on there, then you're up in the regions of around the 350, but the torque level will be much higher. If you start putting other mods on top of that, like front mount intercooler, then you can get more power. The standard turbo is probably capable of around 360, 370 horsepower. That's UK horsepower rather than US horsepower, which is completely different. So it depends on where you're trying to get to power-wise, what you're using the car for. If it's normal road use, then that sort of power level is a really nice level for just being able to actually drive it and enjoy it. So D-cat or sports cat exhaust system make it easier for the air to come out of the engine. Remap induction kit can help around the 350 mark, but below it, it's not really that useful. And then just a map. Yeah, that's about it really. But they're a good car, really good car. And the 2.5, I know I do say about the 2.5 being less reliable than the 2 litres. It is less reliable than the 2 litres. There is less meat in the actual cylinders or the cylinder walls. The liners are really thick. So they are more prone to doing head gaskets, more prone to the liners splitting. Even if you forge the internals, even if you do the closed deck plate on the top of a 2.5, they still split the liners for fun. So it's less reliable to make more power, and certainly above 400 you're into expensive territory. Right, hi Colin, how you doing, mate? Right. So things that are going on at the moment is just being crazy busy building up to show season, first events of the year. first track days of the year that people are doing, kind of digging out the cars from winter hibernation. A lot of Subarus now are second cars. So they don't get used every day. But there are still a lot that are used every day. And, you know, despite being busy for 20 years mapping Subarus, there's still virgin cars that I've come across that have never been mapped. Which is quite weird, really, because, you know, they should have been mapped by now. But yeah, every week there's a car that's never been mapped. Right, okay, so let's bring that one up on the screen. I'm guessing your name's Alex. Hi, Alex. What would cause mild pops in the 4 to 6,000 RPM range on the JDM Legacy GT BL5? Mild pops. Is this on the overrun or as it's actually on boost? If it's actually on boost, then there's a fueling issue going on there, or you've got a cracked spark plug, which can cause that. You get a slight misfire if you've got a cracked plug, or it's possible that someone's put the wrong plugs in it. I've seen that a lot with the Legacy GTs when they're coming in for services or whatever, and you get the plugs out and they've got PFR 6Bs or 7Bs, like the short reach plugs rather than the long reach, which they should have in. So it could be a misfire from a cracked spark plug. Seen a lot of those from brand new plugs as well recently, which is really annoying, particularly on the Legacy, because the plugs at the back are really hard to get out. But generally, I would say if that's on boost, it's because it's running lean. So I would, if you're local to me, bring them up to the dyno. I'll give it a check up and see whether it's running lean, whether it's running rich, or or whether there's some kind of other issue on there. But I would probably suggest getting it checked out. Right. Turns out no one makes an up pipe for an external wastegate for a 99 JDM Forester. Yeah. Ended up making one in the process of installing it. Yeah, good for you. There are people that make them. So you got like a set of GT spec headers, like the expensive headers with an external wastegate on the up pipe. But it's probably best part of £1,000, if not more than that, to actually get that kit. And then you've got the external wastegate on top of that, and it's a lot of money. If you've got the ability to make one yourself, then as long as you're kind of getting the pipes in the right angles and the right direction, then it should be fine. Right, so plugs are brand new, core pipes are fine. I have the ILFR 6Bs. Right, okay, so you got the long reach plugs. I would say there's a fueling issue going on there. Get it checked out. Make sure that it's not running lean on boost, because that's going to kill the engine. Yeah, I would say at least get it checked out and make sure that the air fuel ratio is right. Get a wideband in there. See. Make sure that it's sort of in the low 11s on boost. Yeah, I've been living with a hernia for the last year, well, almost a year now. The gorgeous Spec C. Yeah, that was a nice. I really. I struggle to remember really nice cars. As weird as it sounds, it's the terrible cars that ring a bell. So I can't remember what it did, but it was a really nice car, really nice spec-y. Love a bit of JDM. Right, hi James. UK 2000 turbo, thinking about increasing the power to around 280 to 300. Would like a quick spool as possible. What turbo and supporting mods would you recommend? Cheers. Right, so you would have a TD04 on there, 440 injectors. Your best bet to get to that sort of horsepower, you could do that. You could do around the 280 with the standard turbo, a 3-port solenoid, full decat exhaust, and a map. Fuel pump, always worth doing because it's 26, 27 years old. To get to the 300, you're going to need to change the turbo. The TD04 hybrids are really good now. Fastline make a really nice, it's essentially a 340 brake turbo. But with yours, with the top mount, standard top mount, it's going to limit it sort of below that. But you should get above the 300 quite easily with a map and fuel pump and a better flowing exhaust. Ooh, yeah, good. It depends what's broken on it. Chances are it's the little tiny USB B socket, the micro USB or mini USB, but the little tiny one that pokes down where your feet are, and it's easy to knock that, and the pins kind of pull out the board. That can be repaired. I've done that. Just requires a bit of good soldering. If it's anything else in there, then you're kind of into throwaway territory, which is really annoying, particularly as they don't make the Tactrix anymore, or at the moment. But depending on what car you've got, the Tactrix 1.3U cable works perfectly well on 16-bit ECUs, and the clone Tactrix work fine. Certainly for my testing, work fine on the CAN bus cars. So I would say it's most likely the USB that you've damaged, that's just pulled out of the board, because it's hanging down where your feet are. It's easy to knock it. I've broken 3, maybe 4 of them myself over the years. So yeah, it is possible to repair, but it depends whether it's damaged anything else. I hope it is just that, because they're very, very difficult to get hold of. And some people are asking some ridiculous amounts of money for second-hand ones. Olá, boa noite. Right, what extra safety features can be added? There's all kinds of things that can be added on a Cyvex. You can run oil temperature sensors into the ECU, so they will put it in limp mode or warm up mode, which will restrict the power until it's warm enough, or put it into limp mode if it gets too hot to actually protect it. You can put oil pressure sensors in there that will do the same sort of thing. So it will put it into limp mode if the oil pressure starts dropping, or stop the engine if it drops below sort of preset levels. You can put wideband in there, and again set parameters to say whether it's lean on load, and if it's lean on load, then it will do whatever it can to protect the engine. You can put flex fuel sensors in there. You can anything that you can think of that is possible to do, like coolant pressure sensors you could put in there that will give you kind of early warning of head gasket failures, those sort of things. But there's so many safety features that are standard in there, like the knock control system in the Cyvex is absolutely incredible. And if you pair it with a wideband sensor, which I can sort out for you. Then the fueling control is second to none. It's incredible. Ooh, yeah. How well does the Spec C Auto intercooler spray work, and can this be fitted to a Hawk STI UK model if it's worthwhile? It's difficult to say how well it works. On the dyno, it makes about 2 horsepower difference. So you could argue that it's not really worth all the extra weight, the extra wiring, the hassle of putting it in. There is no feature in the standard UK STI ECU that will operate the auto setup. And you can't just swap into a JDM ECU, because on a Hawk STI it's not drive-by-wire. So you can't even do that. Personally, I would say it's not worth hassling. If you want lower intake temperatures or charge temperatures, then fit a front mount. It solves the problem. You could put cryogenic spray bars onto the intercooler that cool it down. It depends on whether you're married to keeping the top mount intercooler. But yeah, the auto intercooler spray doesn't do an awful lot. It was there for homologation so that they could put a methanol injection system in there, but the main part of it is it's kind of a gimmick that doesn't really do a lot, which is why they dropped it on the later ones. I have got some brilliant ones, but yeah, I can't really divulge some of them, but yeah. Right. How much can one tune a Legacy Legacy 2 litre? Yeah, the thing is, Subaru, when they're sizing a turbo to go onto the car, they kind of pick something that is a little bit higher than higher potential than what's on their car, because they don't want to put a turbo that's too big on there that's going to make it laggy. So a lot of times now they're fitting much smaller turbos than they would have in the old days. Like with the early Imprezas, they'd put a 16G on there, but run it well within itself. Whereas beyond that, they started fitting the TD04s, which is like a 280, maybe 300 horsepower turbo, and just running them at a certain power level. The same with the VF turbos for the STI. They got better at speccing those out. So a Legacy, if that's an auto, then it's difficult to say what the auto will do, because most of the time on the dyno, the dyno is reading wheel horsepower, and when you've got an auto box on the dyno, there's always more transmission losses. So they always underread slightly on the dyno, probably about 10% drop in power compared to what you're expecting. But there's normally on a standardish car probably 10 to 15% gain from mapping in the torque, and a similar sort of gain in the horsepower, depending on how many cats are still in the exhaust system. All right, if you're talking a turbo diesel, I wouldn't map it personally. I don't have done, but then lots of people were experiencing cranks snapping, so I stopped tuning them. Right, okay, Alex, what power upgrades can get a Legacy GT up to around a 320 power mark? The standard turbo will do that, just. You would need like probably a full decat exhaust, if it's legal in your country. Wink, wink. Or a sports cat with a slightly bigger turbo, so a slightly bigger core in the turbo, and then it might do it. The intercooler as standard is pretty small, so you're going to come up against an issue with the intercooler not being able to cool things down properly. So like an upgraded top mount intercooler, the likes of Process West, they do really nice top mounts for the Legacies and the hatches, those sort of things, where it's replacing the standard plastic edged intercooler. They work very well for a top mount. But yeah, it depends on, to get to exactly the 320, you probably want to be putting a slightly bigger turbo on it, and I would recommend just getting your standard turbo, just having some slightly bigger internals in there, just to make sure that it definitely does it. Excuse me, I'm a bit dry today because the Beetle was running methanol and nitrous, so yeah, it was a bit wild in there, and obviously the exhaust out the back, and it was just an assault. Right, thoughts on methanol injection. We have 91 to 94 pump fuel, right? So I'm guessing you're in the States. Methanol injection in Subarus, I haven't seen it working really well on a Subaru. The best way for power, from my perspective, is putting methanol straight in the fuel tank. So a lot of cars are running flex fuel sensors, or with an aftermarket ECU like a Link or a Syvex, run a flex fuel sensor, so it will adjust the fueling accordingly as to how much alcohol-based fuel is in the tank. Because alcohol is the higher octane, it has the oxygen content, it's going to move it further away from the point at which it wants to detonate, and it will actually make a lot more power. Generally, 20% mix of methanol in the fuel tank will make another 10% power on top. The methanol injection kits tend to be used really from a safety point of view, because if you're on the standard ECU, you're unlikely to be able to put inputs that say whether the actual water injection system is working. So you can't tune for it, you can't add extra time, and you can't run it leaner, because it wouldn't know if the tank's run out, and therefore you at that point gonna go smashing into detonation and have some rather large issues and some rather even larger bills. So water meth injection, personally I don't like it. It's a complicated system, and the safety procedures on the standard ECU just aren't there. And if you got an aftermarket ECU, I would go flex fuel all day long. Where can you get the standard connectors to make a loom? Most of them are available, but you're going to spend hours and hours and days probably finding the actual connectors and the pins. iWire in the States sell them as a connector kit. It's quite expensive, and even more so if you're then having to export it to the UK or wherever you are in the world. But iWire certainly has them. They won't divulge what the part numbers are for the connectors, but quite often you can get the connectors and the pins in the UK. You just need to find what they are, so it's just time to research it. Ooh, is it possible to force regen of a DPF? Not to my knowledge, but as I say, I do not tune the turbo diesel versions because they're just too unreliable for me, and I don't want to be in a position where I crank snaps halfway through tuning. Your best bet is someone with the snap-on gear, or other makes are available to plug into the system to actually force it to regen. Not aware that facility is in there for ROM Raider or ECU Edit. First time catching the streams. Yeah, they've been a bit patchy this year, and I'm really apologetic for that, because it's not been a good year from a health point of view. And yeah, I apologise. More videos coming soon, and there is more videos coming soon. Right, evening Neil. Right. So yeah, on the subject of videos coming up, we've got the final video of the Tommy Cara M20B restoration. It is now just 2 things away from the final stage of that. The gauges have come back from New Zealand. They are beautiful, and it's just the seats to put in that have been refurbed, and that's it on that. So as soon as the weather is reliably dry, that'll be going out for a drive, and that will be videoed for the channel. It is a beautiful car, a bit Marmite for the rear wing and some of the bodywork things, but it's a slice of JDM car sort of car culture. So it's good from that perspective. I love it. I think it's superb, and it's immaculate. If anyone's seen it in the flesh, if you've come down to the garage and seen it, it's perfect. Right, how are we doing question-wise? How are we doing time-wise? Like I say, if there's no more questions, then I finish the stream early. That's not a problem. But, you know, I'm sure... yeah, I said hi, mate. It is absolutely gorgeous. But it's undercover at the moment. It's not going out until the roads are absolutely perfectly dry, because the underside is immaculate as well as the outside of it, and the first time that will get driven enthusiastically will be me on the road, and then yeah, that will be videoed. Okay. Yeah, retune. Yeah, it'd be worth checking, Neil. If it was out on the crank by one tooth, then that's going to do weird things to all of the cams. So I think it's the right thing to do to at least get it checked out. Yeah, it's sometimes an issue. Obviously, you're up in Scotland. It's a little bit cooler up there anyway. So yeah, the standard stat works really well. You know, if you've got fans that are working as well, and you've got the standard radiator and the standard fans, and you know they both kick in, it controls itself absolutely fine. There's generally, in my opinion, never any need to go to an uprated radiator. Even on my time attack car, it's 850 horsepower. That ran a standard rad, and was never an issue. There were lots of other issues from running that sort of horsepower, but you know, the cooling system wasn't one of them. Best budget wideband gauge setup. The AEM gauges are good. The only problems with some of the aftermarket wideband gauges are the Bosch LSU sensors. They are quite unreliable at the moment. I don't know whether there's a bad batch, but the AEM gauges work nicely, and you can also output from there and data log it if you wanted to do that, or feed it into the ECU as a narrowband, and it works fine from that. But they are a good gauge. Innovate do one as well, uses the same sensor but a different gauge. If you're on a Link ECU, you can run it into their CAN gauge with the Link CAN Lambda, and that gauge is great because it will cycle through lots of different things. Yeah, the AEM is probably the one that I would recommend. Right. Yeah, it's worth it putting a wideband in there, particularly if you're tuning it. The standard narrowband sensor doesn't tell the truth. Certainly for cruise and idle, the narrowband sensor works fine, but if you're tuning on boost, it often lies to you. So I'd recommend that you move away from that and trust the wideband. Recalibrate the sensor regularly, and you shouldn't have any problems. Hello, hi from Norway. Hi. Yeah, if you're coming to South England, ping me a message. I'm at the dyno. Well, I'm at the Surrey Rolling Road dyno most Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Pop in, say hi, and yeah, be good to see you. Right. Power can you get out of a stock VF48 with a 3-port boost controller? Right. It depends on what engine, depends on what car, depends on what other modifications on there. But VF48, for example, on a hatch SDI with a 3-port boost solenoid, a free flowing exhaust, is around a 350 horsepower turbo. If you put the front mount on, then maybe another 20 horsepower on top of that. On other cars, if it was a let's say a Blob Eye WRX where you haven't got the AVCS, then you're still going to get a similar sort of horsepower out of it, but slightly less torque because it comes in a little bit later. So 350 to 370 horsepower, probably about the same as the TD05 18G. The most I've seen out of a VF48, I think, is just 400, and that was with like 20% methanol, and lots of other modifications. It was just trying to prove a point. What's a TD05 good for on a 2 litre? It depends which TD05 and where it's from. There are an awful lot of cheap Chinese copies of the original TD05 Mitsubishi Turbo. There are 3 different sizes. There's probably actually more than that, but 16G, 18G, and 20G. 16G is probably about 340 to 350 horsepower. Some make slightly more. 18G around the 380 horsepower mark, and the 20G sort of 380 to 420. Obviously, always depends on what fuel you're running, what other modifications have been put on the car, but generally those sort of figures is where it's at. Sometimes you get some freak cars that produce really high power. I think I've had 440 out of a 18G, but it is really unusual. So whenever I'm speaking to someone, I always try and tell them the lowest of the average figures so that they're not disappointed when we're actually tuning it and their car isn't, the super special one. Hi Floyd, how you doing, mate? I haven't heard you for a long time. Earthing of the block, heads and inlet essential, and if so, in a star setup. Most of the JDM cars come with like earthing leads everywhere, and to start with, I used to take the mickey out of that all the time. But as these cars get older and older, most of the actual running issues tend to be earth related. So yeah, it doesn't matter whether it's a star system or individual leads to all over the place, but they can help now because a lot of the earthing points are getting a little bit corroded on the cars. So yeah, it is worthwhile. Generally, like the star setup on the battery terminal and out from there works nicely and neatly. Playing a risky game, tuning a 400,000 kilometers EJ25, but it seems rather healthy, and I plan on building something for 400-ish horsepower once this one goes. 400,000. I've got quite a few customers that are done around that sort of level now, and at that sort of horsepower in engines that shouldn't have handled the horsepower initially, but maybe they've got work hardened over the years. But if you plan on building it when it goes anyway, then chances are it's going to last a lot longer than it would do if you kind of down to your last pennies. I don't know whether you remember that video that I did where I said that your car knows how much money you've got in the bank, and if there's not enough in there, it will go. Ben. Hi, Ben. Big van. Thank you very much. Just put a TD05H turbo on my Hawkeye WRX 2006. Will this do 321 brake horsepower? Oh, you dusty bin. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I would have thought so. It depends on what other modifications, what fuel you're running it on, but I would certainly, if I was tuning that, I'd certainly be looking for way more than that. Generally speaking, a 16G is going to do around the 340 horsepower mark. You got a 321T fitted, hi Neil, and have found an MDX 321H. I know it's a smaller turbo and should spool quicker on 2 litre. Is it worth it? I love the 321H. When Mark and I were testing turbos, what was that? Probably 20 years ago, 18 years ago. The 321H was probably my favourite because it spools up really quickly. It just kind of keeps going and keeps making the power. Incredibly reliable turbos. All you've got to factor in is, depends on how much you're buying it for versus what you'll sell your 321T for. You're going to get more torque, but obviously less top end power than the T. But there's about 30 horsepower in it. I love the 321H. Yes, I think there will be. I think that and some nicer quality methanol would do the job. Your girl bought a late 2004 Forester XT. How much can I try and fiddle out horsepower. We'll have to man up and try it. Right. The 2004 2-litre XT, that should be 173 horsepower, I think, from memory. Tuning on the standard turbo, we'll probably see around the 210, maybe 220. But a really good swap on that is putting a TD04 on there, and you should see the sort of 250, 260 horsepower. Massive difference from the TF035 turbo that's on there as standard. The engine and the gearbox should take, quite a bit more than what they're built for. I would have thought around the 300 to 350 is what the engine and the gearbox should cope with, providing it's been maintained well. And that's the biggest question. You don't know how it's been looked after over the years, but yeah, I would take it up in stages and just see. Chasing power is I think is always an expensive thing to do, rather than chasing the way you want it to drive, which is probably a nicer and it's a nicer thing to find. Once you get there, you know if it drives great, got enough power, then it doesn't matter what the actual power is. It's just how you want it. Right. Yeah, I love Foresters as well. The SG, I had two SG9 STI, brilliant cars. Obviously got the SH 5 at the moment, which I think is superb for daily driver duties. Is great. Sounds a bit Subaru, drives a bit Subaru, but it's not quite as extreme as some of the other cars that I've had over the years. But or will have in the future. But yeah, Foresters do everything, and they surprise people. Right, at the moment, carb intake, WRX intercooler, I want to tune it just to be on the safe side of the intake and turbo back. Yeah, tune it, but go through the steps and do it properly. Make sure you got a wideband on there. Use the deck cans. I know a lot of people in the States don't use deck cans, but the ECU doesn't hear everything that I hear in my deck cans. And it's the things that are going on. If it's persistently going on, it's going to kill it. Maybe there's a link between them not using them and a lot of Subaru engine cars going bang on the dyno. Maxed out the pink injectors on the 321T, and the T isn't stressed at 1.5 bar. Yeah, so I think the 321H, I think would, if you're going to keep those injectors in there, then downsize the turbo a bit. You'll be able to use more of the potential. You're probably not going to lose top end, because if you've held the 321T to what the injectors can cope with, then it's probably around that 400 horsepower mark anyway. Certainly at that sort of boost. Ooh, God, we're flying along with questions tonight. It's like I've not been here for a while. My pleasure. Yeah, the academy that I run on here, some fabulous guys in there that help themselves and help each other, and I help them, and we all chip in together. It's a completely positive environment. No one's stupid in there. No one asks a silly question. So if you're interested in self tuning, then that's certainly where I would recommend you go. Right. EJ206 single turbo swap Is it necessary to modify the ignition advanced map due to the difference in compression ratio? Yeah, if you've increased the compression, then the engine will need less ignition advance, because the flame speed, is affected by the actual compression within the cylinder as well as the boost. So if you've increased the natural compression of that engine by skimming the heads or skimming the block or different pistons, or by a completely different engine altogether, then it's going to need a lot less ignition timing. So if you try to run the old ignition timing with it, then it's probably going to be detonating. So I'd recommend strongly to reduce the ignition timing and build up from there. Right. Sports rider front struts, can they be mounted with max caster with max negative camber or max? I'm not sure I'm following that. You can swap the sides on them, and you could run them as standard, or how they're supposed to be fitted is like adding extra caster and negative camber. If you're using it just on the road, that will generally get you to where you need to be for sort of negative 1.5 camber at the front and a really good amount of caster, which makes it handle great. If you want to know the setup that I used on my Forester STI, then just go back over that video where I said about the pillars on my Forester STI, because I've got all the camber and caster settings in there, which may help. But for the road, I would certainly recommend that setup. I loved it. It was very, very stable. Yeah, the thing I'm struggling to wrap my head around is math scaling. I don't know if I've just overloaded myself with info lately, but I feel silly. Yeah, it's a hard thing to get your head around until it just clicks. Like with math scaling, like a lot of the Subaru Tuning forums, people get really obsessed with finite detail that you just leads you into different rabbit holes all over the place, and using spreadsheets and Excel formulas and whatever to work out what the math scaling should be. Generally speaking, the car tells you the answer anyway. So if you're say at idle and you're wanting to know what the math scaling should be at idle, have a look at what it's doing for fuel corrections in the short term and the long term. That can get confusing. So if you reset the ECU so it gets rid of the learnt fuel corrections, and it's telling you that it's having to take out 10% fuel to get it to the right air fuel ratio while it's idling, then take out 10% out of your math curve at that point. Obviously blend it through, because air is logical in how it enters the engine, so it needs to be a smooth curve. You shouldn't have lumps and bumps in there. But for every sort of math voltage, or the ECU will tell you where it needs to be. And so if it's taken out 10%, lower the curve. If it's having to add 10%, then raise that math value. If you're unsure on that, then if you join the academy, I think I've done maybe 2 or 3 really in-depth videos on that. Right. Okay. Advanced multiplier is 0.825 also shows that the occasional knock event, usually at pass throttle or off throttle. What is the likely cause of the IM being less than 1? Time for a map peak, maybe. The advanced multiplier is like the rough corrections, the big emergency corrections that it thinks it needs to make. If these knock events are happening part throttle or off throttle, it's unlikely to be knock or detonation. It's more likely to be a noise. Common noises that do this are like heat shields that are loose, like particularly the up pipe one where there's 2 tack welds at the top and a couple at the bottom. They very often break loose, and if they're rattling, the ECU will hear that through the knock sensor and will take some dramatic action to try and protect your engine. So first thing that I would do is just give everything a wiggle in the engine bay to see whether it's knocking on the engine or anywhere near the knock sensor. Heat shields, as I say, I've had it where like a little fuel line clip was just vibrating against the inlet manifold, and that caused it. Dump valve sort of hitting the inlet manifold, or the little metal pipe that goes across is vibrating on the intercooler. All these things can cause the ECU to have a little bit of a paddy fit and just drop the advanced multiplier down, and even in extreme events, put it into limp mode. So just check on the noises first. If you can get rid of the noises, then I'd say it's a very good chance that you'll stop that. If it's kind of making those adjustments from 1 down to 0.825 at a certain rev point, then it is possible to raise the point that the knock system is actually listening for detonation. Sometimes you need to do that on the 2.5 because the AVCS solenoids can be quite noisy and the injectors are noisy, and it sometimes confuses itself. But get some deck cans on there if the noise hunt and the noise fixing doesn't solve the knock correction issue. Get some deck cans on there to see whether it is actually detonating, rather than just trusting what the ECU is saying. Right, how are we doing time-wise? Yeah, a lot of things are really simple once you just get rid of all the bullshit that some people tell you. Tuning a car that's well behaved is really easy, but you just need to kind of filter out all the rubbish that some people tell you, and all the people that are going through, you got to do math scaling. A lot of the time, math scaling isn't needed. The ECU has got a range that it needs to operate, that it's allowed to operate. So learning will go plus or minus 15%. Short-term fuel trims will go plus or minus 25%. Subaru built that in for a reason, because they know that atmospheric conditions change day to day. They know that the fuel temperature changes day to day. They know that the underbonnet temperatures or under hood temperatures change day to day. So that would all have an effect on the fuel correction. So if you get to a point when you're tuning the car where you say if it's less than 5%, then it's close enough, because the next day it's going to be different. The day after that will be different, which is why I say about the rabbit holes. People will spend days and weeks monitoring math corrections and going right the way through, and you end up at the end of it at exactly the same place you started. So don't get too wrapped up on getting it down to zero. You will never get it down to zero. Sounds like more negative camber option is the best. Not necessarily. Caster is what you really want. You can always add negative camber with some camber bolts on the strut. So personally, I would go more caster and then put camber adjusting bolts in there that will actually do the camber at the wheel, because doing that for caster is a lot more involved. Right, I think we're at the end of it. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for your questions. If you got any questions that I haven't answered, pop them in the comments for the video once it goes into catch up, and I will reply as soon as I can. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys.